What do you get if you take an immensely underrated top-down cooperative shooter from 2015, slap it into a third-person perspective, drench it in tasty-looking graphics, limber it up with a shiny new physics engine, and add a healthy dose of intergalactic Starship Trooper bug infestations? You guessed it, it's the fast-approaching February the 8th release of Helldivers 2. Now let's cut to the chase. Will it be good? I'm feeling incredibly hopeful and positive about this release, and based on the recent content drops from Reforge Games, I'm really struggling to contain my hype levels. This is particularly true of the most recent trailer which they've just dropped, called the United We Stand War trailer, and I'm going to go over that in a moment. But first, what is it that's actually drawing me into this game? I've been thinking about that today, and I think first and foremost, it's because I'm an absolute sucker for a co-op shooter, particularly ones that offer scaling difficulty levels for added layers of challenge, and Helldivers 2 appears to really be focusing on how they can keep players engaged and encouraged to play the game cooperatively. And this throws me back into recent experiences that I've had with friends playing games like Vermintide, Darktide, Outriders, Deep Rock Galactic. The list goes on, folks. This has got me incredibly interested. I absolutely love those games, and it's such a shame, particularly for games like Outriders, when the end game content is released out of whack and it causes a diminished player base. But that aside, what's really drawn me into this game is the level of customization on offer. I was really concerned at first that we were going to be given a game where you could only pick certain setups and loadouts, and it was going to be quite concrete in that nature. Once I realized creating builds, diversifying complementary party compositions with my friends was a realistic option, I was completely sold. So, with that being said, let's discuss the most recent trailer that's just dropped. One of the key headlines of the trailer is that we're going to be spending most of our time in combat, which is an absolutely welcome declaration. However, this seemingly obvious statement is also followed up by a really interesting point.
Everything that's happening outside of the mission when you're on your ship is about strategy. The galactic map shows you the current situation of the war. It shows you what planets are super Earth planets, what planets are being covered by some sort of enemy scum, and where the battlefront is. And as the Helldiver, you get to decide exactly what planet you're going to fight on, what enemies you're going to go against. You get to make quite a number of choices there.
Now this is really intriguing. Placing the choice of planet/biome drop locations in combination with which enemies we face in the player's hands makes my build creation senses tingle. Whether we're facing the bugs, automatons, or any other race that the devs have in store for us, I think this will open up the opportunity for us to build our loadouts to be tailored towards certain environments and circumstances. This, in tandem with the fact that we're already being given information that the game is going to support different archetype playstyles such as tank, DPS, and support setups, I think this will make for some really interesting and engaging theory crafting when we're out of action on our ships. Working in different stratagem combinations is something which is immensely appealing, and I love the fact that missions are very much going to be a drop-in style approach, which will promote creative and experimental styles of gameplay. This is immensely important to the longevity of this style of game, and I guess the question is, how deep will we be able to go with it? I'm not expecting something akin to Path of Exile here, that would be absolutely ridiculous, but perhaps something more like Deep Rock Galactic, or perhaps Remnant from the Ashes 1. Impactful choices that make an impact on the moment-to-moment gameplay experience within a mission. The approach taken to missions is another element highlighted in this trailer and has really piqued the interest of the community. As Helldivers, we're given orders, and these are split into major orders and personal orders. Major orders are essentially high-priority missions which are completed by the whole player base as a collective. I think this is a fantastic idea and really reminds me of things like the Dragon in Dragon's Dogma 1. This drums up community spirit and camaraderie, and if it's done right by the developer, I can see this really adding fuel to the engagement fire. Apparently, these are major aspects of the game and how the story will pan out, and it will actually give us the ability as a player base to actually alter the face of the galaxy as we know it. I think this is such a great premise. I'm incredibly intrigued about how this will play out, and I'd also be interested to hear your thoughts about how this aspect of the game is going to work. What would you like to see from this system? Any ideas? Sound off in the comments below. The personal rewards missions sound much more basic and much more like a traditional reward system from any other game that you've played previously. Think selecting a mission and getting dropped into a certain scenario and then bouncing back out with your rewards. Very normal stuff there, folks. Things start to get a little bit more interesting though when we talk about operations. These are a series of smaller missions of which the number required to successfully complete increases based on the difficulty you've selected. This sounds a lot like the deep dive system in Deep Rock Galactic, and that's one of the best elements of that game, so I'm really interested in how they're implementing this. The devs also nodded towards the fact that they're going to be monitoring how the community engages with the game and react accordingly by implementing community-wide buffs and debuffs, which are linked to the story, which we'll be progressing through together as a player base. Again, I think this is something which really opens the door for some incredibly interesting opportunities that will far transcend the initial release window, provided that the developers stay on form with the momentum in this area. I certainly think that they will. This sounds like they're going to be looking at adding challenging modifiers which will alter the flow of the gameplay, and I think that this is an area that could be harnessed in a way that would force players to think more carefully about how they construct their loadouts and how they work as a party composition. This may sound like an off-putting premise for more casual players. Perhaps there is a way for this system to be implemented so it only becomes a major problem as we reach the upper echelons of difficulty. In terms of progression, the Helldiver Destroyer can be upgraded in ship management. Think buying better guns, eagles, stratagems, but to do this we need to acquire things called samples. You find these moment to moment during your missions, and the caveat is that once you've found these, you do need to extract this to get that currency back in your possession on the ship to spend. This, for me, is an incredibly important area of the game, and it often makes or breaks the longevity of a game after its launch if done incorrectly. Get the rewards and currency system wrong in a game launch and it can suffer heavily. From what was said in the trailer and analysing the screenshots, there appears to be 4 types of currency. They named samples, requisition and medals. Forgive me if I've missed something here. And what I'd like to know is a little bit more about the nuances of this system. Like, is there a certain tier of item / currency that we can only gain access to if we're clearing absolute top tier difficulty? Will there even be this kind of layer to the game? I'm personally a fan of this, but I know it can be quite polarizing within the community. So again, what are your thoughts here, folks? One thing's for sure though, I'm really pleased to see how much they are leaning into the customization within the game. Now, with all that being covered, it still begs the question, what do I think could potentially stop this game from being successful? Well, the elephant in the room with all these types of games is often how the developer handles the post-launch content and manages the game after release. I've seen people throwing the live service tag around quite aggressively about this game, which I think's dangerous talk, especially with the current drama surrounding the upcoming release of the new Suicide Squad game. It's not going to be like that as far as I'm concerned. I was actually considering diving into Suicide Squad myself, but I've decided my efforts are better placed with Helldivers, so go figure. But the question still remains, how are they going to handle post-launch? Well, we're not really sure yet. They haven't been completely crystal clear with us on that. They could potentially run it in a similar manner to Helldivers 1, keeping the release of new Helldivers, new better gear that gives us a reason to return. This, though, is a bit of a classic loot treadmill format, and whilst it's great for those of us who absolutely know life games and don't mind having to invest all our gaming time into one game, this is really off-putting for people who like to spread themselves more widely across different games, and personally I'd much prefer it if they were more aligned with releasing more endgame style content such as raids, missions, extra modifiers, which we can overcome more so based on our skill level than constantly upgrading to higher tiers of gear. If I wanted that type of gameplay loop, I'd go grab an MMO and kiss goodbye to my life more so than I do already. So what are your thoughts here, folks? Have you got an opinion on this? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. I'll be covering Helldivers 2 extensively, so check out this next video for more content of this nature. Take care of yourselves, and I'll see you in the next one.